respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, this space where we are meeting this evening. The Menang people have been here on this Noongar Budja for thousands of years. The connection they share with this place we call the Great Southern runs generations deep. It is with great respect that I acknowledge the Menang people and their elders past, present and emerging. It's a privilege to be here, to live here and to learn here. Thanks for coming tonight. It's such a privilege to be here to share stories tonight. We have Alex Miller with us this evening, author of A Brief Affair, which we all read this month and we loved it. Alex, you have won a lot of awards for your writing, quite a lot, too many for me to remember them all, but I do recall that you're a two-time Miles Franklin Award winner. We are just so thrilled that you're with us, so thank you very much. Just one more round of applause.
I can't hear the applause.
Okay. Now, Alex, I learnt today that we have someone in common. You know a fella, I believe, one of my good friends, John Dowse.
Sure do. What a character.
Quite a character. He couldn't be here tonight.
Not good enough, John.
He sent a message for me to share with you. And I'll try and do my best Dousty impression. Dear Alex, all those years I tried to get you to Albany and now you're here and I'm not. Well, you're not really here. You're there on a thing that zooms you here. Still, I would have loved to see you and shared you with Billy, your host, that's me, and the fine folk of this book club, which, by the way, includes my lifelong partner, the lovely Gritzia. Alex, Javier, next year in Jerusalem, peace, health and love, John Dowse.
Oh, he's going to Jerusalem next year.
Well, that's what he's planning. All right. Now let's get into it, shall we?
Yeah.
So, Alex, tell us a bit about yourself as a boy. What were you like as a kid?
Horrible.
In all the best ways, I hope.
I don't know. My mum called me the difficult one.
Ah, okay.
My teachers called me by names that aren't allowed to be said in public. My father said, don't take any shit from these bastards, Alex. And I took that as my call sign for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say about my childhood.
Yeah.
I'm joking. Whatever. I'll write a book about it one day. It's all story, isn't it?
Yes. Yep. Well, we certainly learnt that from your writing. So what was your relationship to reading as a child? What kind of books did you enjoy?
I didn't have a relationship to reading. I didn't read. I could read. I could read before I went to primary school, so I must have been reading something. Can't remember what. I think, well, books were important to me because, and you suppress things that you don't want to particularly emphasize. We do that all the time. But I do remember one occasion when my parents and my sisters went without Christmas presents so they could afford to buy me a pair of self-guided ball-bearing roller skates, which were bloody expensive.
Wow.
Yeah, okay. So I got them and I skated. And that's all I did for the next however long. That's what I do. I became a perfect skater on my own, skating badly, miles and miles and miles away from home. High-speed skater. And loved it. And I was skating at high speed one day when I saw this boy gazing at me with a kind of rapt fear, I suppose. And he was wearing a private school scarf, and we were from the council estate, so we were kind of the enemy. And he saw this member of the enemy heading towards him at high speed on roller skates, and he froze. Anyway, when I got to him, he was clutching a book to his chest. And I said, so what have you got there? And he held the book out to me kind of tremblingly. And I had a look at it, and I said, I'll swap you for the skates. So the book didn't have a cover on it, but it was Billy Bunter's Omnibus. And Billy Bunter
Oh,
had nothing to do with the world I lived in, but had a lot to do with the private school life of people, children. And I took it home after giving him the skates. And my father said, "Oh, Christ, that looks like an interesting book, Alex. What happened to the skates?" I said, "Oh, I swapped them for the book." "Oh, Jesus, I don't think that was. I said, "Oh, let's have a read." So anyway, he starts reading the book, and we all got involved in the story, whichever story it was in the omnibus. And that really was the kind of signature, I suppose, of my life. I must have been. I mean, I had a lovely family who no one got annoyed or angry about. You swapped the roller skate? No, no one said that. They all looked over his shoulder at the book, oh, yeah, that's a good story, yeah. And I can't remember who wrote that book. I do actually have a copy of it here somewhere. I found a copy in a second-hand shop once, and I thought I'll buy it. I haven't
yeah.
reread it. Anyway, that's my highbrow story. If you want the lowbrow story,
Yes, yes. So,
you're going to go
from what
through all these questions that you sent to me,
oh,
310
I know,
questions.
it was a lot.
And I thought
I
maybe
know.
I'll say to Billie when I meet her
Yeah,
through the air, maybe you could pick one of these questions that possibly relates a little bit to this book, whatever it's
the
called.
book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
A Brief Affair. And I'm sure my publishers would love it if we mentioned that. And
Well, yeah, I know. I did send a lot. I do like to over prepare. I I
yeah,
I I
yeah.
hate
Look,
the
you lose
idea of.
marks. No, once when over a certain number of questions, you begin to lose marks. If you have no questions at all, you don't even get marks. But beyond 12 or even one really good question, and I said to Steph, my wife, just before I came in here,
Yeah.
maybe I'll just ask, because Steph said, how are you going to answer all those questions? And I said, darling, you know very well I don't answer questions. But maybe if I suggest to Billie that she asks me one of the questions that she'd most like an answer to.
Yeah. All right.
Is that a
That's.
challenge?
I know. That.
Sorry.
Can I have? Can I have three? No.
Try
No. All
one,
right.
and if you've got time after I've struggled to try and answer it, if there's still time left,
There were a lot of questions. Did you like the direction of some of these questions, or did you feel that
wonderful.
they were
No,
just
there's a lifetime's work in answering them.
okay? Well, actually, one that I'd like to know, and this I don't know, this might be quite a quick answer for you. I'm not
Sure.
sure, but I am really interested to know. Um, you've written 13 novels, one of which is an auto fiction book, so the Passage of Love. You've written a collection of short stories, and you've written Max, a non-fiction memoir. They're different styles of writing, and I imagine you need to have different technique and process when you're crafting these. Out of the experience of these different styles of writing, which did you enjoy the most?
Yeah, I think it's a bit like asking somebody about their children. And you have a
Ah,
different approach to the older girl who's very good at sport, and the younger girl who sort of kept to herself a bit, was very quiet, did a lot of reading, hid under the bed, stuff like that. Um, and which approach to life did you prefer? Did you no, no, impossible.
yeah,
You
yeah,
love them both to distraction.
yeah,
And I think there is a problem, not a problem, but there's too much emphasis, I think, laid on the difference between fiction and non-fiction. I mean, you've probably noticed that I don't kind of make it up. I observe,
yeah,
I hope there's a degree of accurate observation about my
yeah,
writing, and it's an observation of our lives. And in particular, and you've mentioned this somewhere, of our inner lives.
Yes.
that don't get a lot of attention on the popular media because people like to see things happening rather than
Yeah.
things being. It's difficult to make movies out of my books because when they start making a movie, they find, hang on, the meaning is not in the explosion at the end or the fact that they have sex every 5 minutes against the
Yeah.
wall making grunting noises. Those
Yeah.
things don't actually happen in my books, or if they do, it's a sort of accident. um, I guess the story that unfolds for me, and it's always a kind of adventure, a journey to find what the story is. The material is there, and having the material is one thing. Like saying, for example, I'm going to write a book about the Americans in Australia during the war. Great, there's a lot of material. How are you going to write the book? You're going to leave out 99% of the material in order to get the story, because the story is a more succinct thing than the material. So, I mean, I had the same problem with Max. Max is it's a Holocaust book. It's a Holocaust memoir, something I never intended to write. I loved Max and I wanted to write about him, but I didn't want to write about the Holocaust. Of course, I was required to, and to read widely for years, to learn German, because so much of the resources are in German, the archival resources, and Russian. But yeah, I mean, it was a different experience. And I think I was talking to Tom Griffiths, the historian. I definitely was talking to him because he's a lovely friend. And he said that one of the things I say in the book, or I've said it somewhere about that book, for example, rather than fiction, non-fiction, was the delight, the magic of the simply true.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there is a magic in the fact that you've searched and traveled and done all this study and research on trying to find a person's life. And then you find a salient fact that's incontestable, and it fits these things together, like finding a head to put on the body, or you didn't realize it, but there's been an arm missing. So a real sense of, here's something that you could not have possibly made up, and it completes a portion of the picture that's critical to the story. That sort of thing. That's less um, present, less of a problem, as it were, with fiction. With fiction, the thing I love most is to find, if I'm reading, I love to find something that's being said by the writer, which I recognize. Ah, yeah, that's true. I've never said that, in fact, but I've known it to be true. That's the way I feel about it. So there is that kind of quiet gift inside your mind, in your inner life, when you're reading a book that enthralls you. Unless it's a kind of super adventure book and you just want to get and find what happened at the end, and you're kind of reading it with your mouth open while smoking a cigarette and several glasses of whiskey. But when you're not doing that, but you're involved in the book at another level, then those are the moments to me that are quite magical. And they relate to each other, I think, those things, the magic of the simply true and
Yeah.
the observation of human life and people, like Fran, for example. Um, is Fran well observed, or is she a vague, opaque sort of character who never really leaves the page but is trapped in the page? I don't know. I'm not a reader of Fran. Readers complete the book for you. When you
Yeah.
write a book, the book's not complete until you're doing something like this with you guys, and somebody says something about the book that you've never thought about. That's the book
Yeah.
they've read. They've brought their experience to the book, to the story. And if you've written in a way that is closed, in the sense of, don't worry about it, I'll explain it all to you, forget it. They're not going to read the bloody book. They're going to throw it into the corner or put it down or give it to someone as a Christmas present before it gets dirty. Um, they paid a lot of money for it. So may as well make use of it, but they're not going to read it.
Yes. Yeah.
Because
So
reading
you.
is a business, like, you know what reading is? It's bringing yourself finding room for yourself in the book. So to me, the secret, if you like, of all
Yeah.
good writing, fiction, non-fiction, short stories, whatever, is to invite the reader in.
Yeah.
And that is leaving space for the reader's imagination. And I can't remember what you asked me, but I mean, that's sort of the answer.
No, no, no. That's you've actually answered several of my questions in that answer, and
Seven already.
several, yeah.
No,
Because I was because I was going to ask you, how do you feel as as a creative, as a writer, releasing your work and letting it go? And then we've talked to some authors before who do struggle with, they have admitted to struggling with people's interpretations of their work. But I like what you're saying here, that it's kind of part of your responsibility as the author to leave that space for the reader to step in and make it
totally.
theirs. Is that,
It's what
yeah?
makes it
And
readable. I
yeah,
mean, it's
yeah,
not going to be readable without that. It's not your book. And
yeah,
we don't do, as you know, I mean, you're probably silly enough and old enough to know this. And we don't do anything alone.
yes,
We may claim to, we may not have any acknowledgements in our book, but boy, oh boy, do we owe people
yeah,
and we owe aspects of life. I was telling a story today at lunchtime to a friend, and it was just to illustrate, did he know this person in Paris? Sorry, in Berlin.
yeah,
A guy who started a little coffee shop, and we knew him by accident, kind of thing. And he had lived in Bordertown. Now, Bordertown is a town not far from the border of South Australia and Victoria, and it's commonly referred to as a shithole. But I don't think it is, because I think that's one of those silly ways of talking about somewhere that you don't really know. If you get there and you find there are these beautiful people who care about you because you're a fellow human being and respect you, Bordertown comes alive, as anywhere does. So we were kind of talking about this guy, and when I finished talking about him to this guy over lunch, he said, "That's a movie." And I said, "No, no, it's a story. It's I see the story, you see the movie." He said, "Yeah." So
yeah,
it was lovely, but that's it. It's to be open to the other person's presence in the story.
yeah. Your father, I read that your father was a very good storyteller, had quite a penchant for it.
Yeah, he used to. We'd say, "Tell us a story, Dad, before bedtime," and Mum would say, "It's a bit late, but I just make it a short one. So okay." And he'd start off, he never had a problem. He never said, "Oh, I don't really feel like telling a story tonight," or, what can I tell a story about? Looking around, never said that. The first thing he saw, the first thing I saw then was some reflex paper on my desk. He would say, "You know the lad who invented that paper? You know what
Yeah,
happened? How come that comes? We have it here, and we're all talking about it. Uh, we'd all be, what, really? Okay." He didn't know what the hell he was going to say,
yeah,
but he'd kind of find things to say about it, relate it to other things on the desk, like the pens that are sitting on it in a little old thing I've got here with pens in it, stuff like that. And he'd bring it all together eventually. And then Mum would say, "You've really got to go to bed now. It's just too late." Okay, finish it tomorrow night. Nah, we never finished the story because there is no ending. There's
yes,
no
yeah.
ending, there's no answer, and the story goes on.
Do you think that that impacted the way you write? Because I understand that you're not a plotter or a planner, but you like it to evolve as you write it. Do you think that your dad's storytelling impacted the way that you create stories?
Definitely.
Yeah,
Only I wrote, and he. I mean, the great thing for him was not the publication of a book, but the sitting around a fire with a group of people, either loved ones or friends, or the company, and the company
yeah,
made the story. So yeah, it was a big deal. I think his pleasure was in the company
yeah,
of the
yeah.
story, the enthralled people sitting around leaning forward, hoping it was going to reach its end.
I read the transcript of a podcast. You were on the Garrett podcast, and
A what?
you were on the Garrett podcast recently, and I forget the name of the lad you were talking to, but you were talking about the fact that you said to your dad, Dad, I've finished a manuscript. It's going to be published. I've written a book, and he said to you, well, what'd you do that for?
Yeah.
And his point was that he saw the importance in the audience and the telling of the story, not necessarily the packaged, you needed to be there and with your audience. Is that right?
Yeah, it wasn't an advance for Dad. Why sit in a room on your own dealing with story? Come on.
Yeah.
You've got to be out there with a group of people and maybe a glass of whiskey.
Yes. Yeah.
And
So,
no, go
sorry.
on. No, go on. You're going to mention this book maybe secretly.
No, I am.
Oh,
I
good. Yeah,
am.
okay. Yeah, we
this
can.
Is my next question.
We can slip it in here.
My next question, and I'm going to put a timer on because I have a real tendency to go overtime. So I'm going to put a timer on so that, because I know it's late for you over there. All right, I've started.
No, it's not that late. 27 past 9.
So, where were you when Dr. Frances Egan first came to your mind? Where were you? What were you doing when you had the idea of this character and her story?
Okay. I'd finished Max, the biography or memoir that we were talking about just now. And we'd come back from Israel, where we'd been, and I'd written the story, and it was going to be published. Maybe it was. I don't think it was published yet. It was kind of in the pipeline. And our daughter, who'd lived in Berlin and still lived there then for 11 years, was here visiting us. And it was winter, because we had the fire on in our little sitting room, and she was sitting there with Steph and myself. And she said, "What are you going to do next, Dad?" And I said, "I have no idea." She said, "Well, you've got to do something because you know how grumpy and unpleasant you get when you're not working." I said, "Yeah, you tell me that, but I don't know it. I think I'm okay and everybody else is a bit mean." But she said, no, that is not the truth. But anyway, and I do believe her. I just get a bit depressed, I think, when I'm not working. And we started, for some reason, talking about Steph's work, where she used to work. She was an academic. She worked at the university, much in Fran's position, if you like. And we were talking not about a possible book. We were talking about being haunted. Steph is not somebody who responds quickly to haunting. So what? There's a ghost? Yeah, what the hell? Who cares? On we go. It's just a bit cold in here, something like that. Whereas Kate and I sort of grab hold of each other and sit together and think, oh my God, it's fucking haunted in here. And we both feel it very strongly. But there was an occasion when Steph felt it overpoweringly. This was when she was working in an office at the old lunatic asylum, so called. So we talked about that and hauntings for a while. Kate and I had experienced hauntings, which we'd shared, in fact, scary things. And Kate said, well, why don't you write a ghost story? So I said, okay, something light and cheerful after Max, which is, where we trod through some pretty rough stuff there. And yeah, it'd be nice. I don't have to learn a new language. I don't have to, read dozens of books. I'll write a ghost story, sure. But when I came to do it, I found I wasn't sufficiently interested in the supernatural and its consequences. Not in a direct way, not in a way that I could sort of deal with it as, okay, this is a ghost story. But what I did find was that I was much more interested in this woman who, in a sense, came from my sense of Steph's predicament at the time, dealing with overpowering men in a situation where a great deal was being demanded of her, including going to China every year to teach and to sell the college and do all that stuff, you know.
Mm.
Um, so I started thinking more along those lines, and it wasn't Stephanie I was thinking of in the end. It was more myself. And writing as a woman, I write as myself. I don't really worry about whatever the differences are, they're there. But I don't worry about analyzing the difference or finding them problematic. I just trust and respect the fact that we're two human beings and we
Mm.
share 99.99 recurring percent of our whatever it's called DNA. Um,
Yeah.
with monkeys too, actually, but certain monkeys, not all monkeys qualify. But there's not that much difference. And the current generation of my daughter's age, those people, thankfully, they've blown the old um, tight-lipped, I'm a man, you're a woman, that's the end of the story. It's
Yeah.
bullshit. It's bullshit. We know that now. It's the rainbow world. Thank God for that. And it's released so many people from a life of suffering and
Mm.
difficulty. Now, the woman who Fran meets in the hospital is a woman who's only there because she's a lesbian, because she was in a lesbian relationship at school, and that got her into trouble, and she was expelled. And then, when she was older, once again, she was sent to a rest home or a lunatic asylum. It wasn't called that then, it was called a hospital by then. And her father, who was a High Court judge, um, and the chap who ran the lunatic asylum, they were mates. And he said, why don't you send her here for a while to have a rest? So she finished up being there for years, but she also had a relationship with another woman. And that all began to come out of what I was thinking about and of what the haunting could possibly be. And
Mm.
then Joseph, the character, came into the story up the stairs. Really, somebody, she said, oh my God, one of those bastards has come back in the middle of the bloody night. I'm still here because I missed the earlier train. Ah, Jesus. I just hope to God it's not whatever his name was. And it wasn't. It was the lovely Joseph.
Yeah.
Joseph comes in. I saw your light was still on. And he, in the end, as you know, if you've read the book, says to her, this really is something that would interest you. And it's like that wonderful meeting. I mean, I wasn't planning it, but I kind of found these things. And when they
Yeah.
fitted, I accept them. It's not, well, I resist it. I mean, in a sense, I had to learn not to resist the story. When I first started writing, I used to try and plan things, and I was hopeless at it. I'd plan it like you are with your questions. You're hopeless at it because you finish up with 370 questions, keep going. So you write a book called Questions in the end.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
people who read the book, having read it, they realize, oh my God, they know the person not only who questioned the situation, but they know the situation that she questioned. And
Yes.
so everything is a story. So your
Yeah.
questioning, going over the top, is potentially itself something that if it occurred to me, I would sit here. Steph says, "Oh, that's a short story." I say, "Novel, darling,"
Ah.
because I know what I'm going to do. I know what I finish up
Yeah.
doing with the material, and that's sort of searching it rather than researching it, and finding in it this other human being. And the book, really, the one you've just read, is principally Fran's book. But there
Yes.
are characters in it who are like gifts. I think little Tommy, totally a gift. He
Yeah.
arrived
Yeah.
fully grown as his little self, but fully the person he was with all his interests and secrets with him. I believed in him. There he was. So I don't question him. I just accepted him. And he fitted in on the hill with the old lady up there
Mm.
who'd been there. Uh, when those things fit in, um, the tendency can be for me to resist. It used to be when I was much younger, I'd kind of resist them because I had a plan, didn't I? And then somewhere I read Napoleon said plans are to be thrown away. You know,
Right. Yeah.
they were on the battlefield and he said to his general who's standing next to him, okay, Send the cavalry up into the trees, up into that woodland up there. And the general said, yeah, but it's not in the plan. And Napoleon said, it wasn't raining in the plan.
Yes, yeah.
Reality takes over.
Yeah.
And reality demands your attention. And that is what I try to be open to, and to that sense of authentic insight into the person, not just make something up in order to have a scene can be sensational or something. Oh, I might get their interest back with a bit of sensation. I never do that. I just trust the bloody story. The story will find you, in a sense. I know it sounds crazy, but I'm not being supernatural, but it's paying attention and respecting the offer of the imagination that's coming out of it. You never. I mean, I went to a prison, not as an inmate, but as a visiting writer, and told, and there was I should have been an inmate probably, but the inmates were all women, and they all just looked like you, normal, middle class, educated sort of women. And I don't know what they'd all done, but some of them were in there for years, for a long time. And this woman said to me, oh, your theme that runs through all your books is that of the absent mother. I said, what? I mean, I never knew that. She brought herself to it. She was an absent mother. She was in for 7 years. 7 years without your children at any age. Okay, so maybe when they're 40 or 50, even then, my children are 44 and 32. So even now, if I was away for 7 years, it would devastate my life. But when they're young, you've lost them. The rest of your life may be made up of an attempt to reclaim them. I don't know. It hasn't happened to me, and I haven't really explored that. But she was an absent mother, and what she saw in my books was examples of absent mothers. I mean, you read your own book. I was very grateful to her because she actually told me about something that had been under the radar for me. But there I was, secretly writing about an event of my very early childhood. Wonderful.
And that was with one of your earlier books too, wasn't it?
Passage of Love.
Yes, okay, yeah. So this has been a bit of a reoccurring theme that's been happening in your books.
What?
Mothers.
Absent mothers?
Yeah, absent mothers.
The struggle, I think, of motherhood. I read a wonderful book years ago. I wrote a book called Conditions of Faith. It's a long time ago now, so people sort of forgot about it or haven't read it or whatever. But it's a book about a woman whose story is really my story. I mean, I grew up in a working class housing commission flat in South London during and after the war. And there was no future really for us. I wasn't offered a future by the kind of life that was there. I had to go and find one. You can't get there from here was the sort of signpost. And I had to do something about that. And I don't know why I'm telling you this. Never told anybody before. Yes, I have actually. Have I? Anyway, whatever. Another question.
Okay.
I lost the way.
Which character surprised you the most in A Brief Affair?
Yeah, I think Valerie. Valerie, who's 86, which is my age now, or she's 85 or 86. He couldn't make up his mind, so he decided, okay, she's one of those. She couldn't make up her mind. How old am I? I don't know, something, you know. And it's she's in the death zone. You know, the 80s is when we die.
I've heard you talk about this death zone, actually. At the National Library, you talked about the death zone.
Did I?
And I don't think your family are fans of it, are
they? No, they just turn away and suggest we have a coffee or something.
Yeah.
I changed it anyway to something else, which I've forgotten because I like the death zone.
The last chapter, I believe you called it.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Chapter.
Yeah. It's the last chapter. I think it's a bit gloomy with the death zone. It's like you're still taking it on.
There's potential adventure in there, isn't there?
Yeah, that's right. Come on, let's get ready. Yeah. Ready for the death zone. You all ready for the death zone, you lot? Some of you probably are.
Do any of the
I can't see any
members
of you,
here? Do any of the members here have a question for Alex? Yes. Oh, sorry, just before you start, we've got a roving mic. Look, Lockie's rushing over with the mic. Thank you.
Is it on?
All right, yes.
Hi, Alex. My name's Cass. My question is, you've said a few times that you're writing about women from your perspective. Like you've said a couple of times you were writing as a female character, but you were thinking of your experience or whatever.
Absolutely.
So what's behind that decision, and why not write it as a male?
Because women aren't actually men. I mean, some become men and some men become women. I know that, and I don't doubt it, and I respect it. But the people I'm talking about, I mean, Fran wasn't a man.
So to do justice to that character, she could never have been a man. Is that what you mean?
Would have been
for where the story
well, it would have been
going,
another
or?
story, I suppose, about this man who, for example, would have sat on the bus in Hefei with Mongol, but they probably, unless they were gay, they probably wouldn't have had a brief affair.
Yes.
And so I don't know. It's not a matter of choice. Really, the character is who the character is. I have written about men, of course. I've written about Max. I've written about Bobby Blue in Coal Creek. I've written about Bo and Annabelle in Journey to the Stone Country. A whole heap of men. Whenever they've been men, I've written about them. Whenever they've been women, I haven't let it inhibit me. And I wrote a book about Emily Stanton, I still remember her name, in Conditions of Faith. And in a sense, what I was recognizing was when I was a kid, I didn't have, I mean, you weren't taken seriously in the culture that I came from. If you were a little working class boy with no education, you were not taken seriously. If you had some plan or other, it seemed that you were an idiot. Fancy having a plan like that. Get out there and get on with the labouring, or go to prison or whatever else your fate is that's awaiting you. And similarly, women had the same problem. And the problem wasn't based on their social standing. It was based on the fact that they just weren't taken seriously. Not always. Some forced their way through and said, "You'll take me seriously or die in the bloody attempt." And they were pretty tough and they did it. No worries about that. And I came across quite a few of them when I was researching that book. Two in particular, two women who were teaching at Melbourne University when Emily Stanton was there in 1923 was the specific date. They had a sabbatical and they bought a donkey. They went to South Africa, bought a donkey, bought some gear, and they travelled, just the two of them, through the entire length of Africa. This is true. Right up to the Suez, right up to Egypt and the north and Tunisia. Unbelievable. On their own, just the two of them, to what used to be called defenceless women. Dropped the word defenceless, I think.
Yeah.
But so they were women, and had I written their story, it would have been really stupid to try and invent them as men. They weren't men. But Emily's story was my own story. How do I get taken seriously? I don't really know what I want to do, but I have an ambition. She had an ambition. She was restless for something more.
Yes.
I mean, one of the reasons why she probably had an affair with a priest was she mistook the restlessness for a need to break out of her marriage. I don't know. I haven't analysed it. I don't analyse them. But if someone were to analyse it, they might see that as a possible motive, a subconscious sort of motive. And leaving her daughter in the end, leaving her child behind. People have said, "Oh, no. Women don't do that." Well, yeah, they do actually. And there's a famous Australian artist woman who did that herself. And from Heidi, you'll probably all know who she is. And so, no, they do. It's the same with in Love Song. The woman goes to another man other than her husband to become pregnant because it's obvious, it's apparent that he can't make her obvious. can't make her pregnant.
Pregnant, yeah.
And she just longs for, passionately, this little girl who she imagines in her mind. And that's partly based on, once again, on immediate sort of experience of Steph, who really needed to have Kate, which was our second child. And we weren't in much of a position to have more children after we'd had Ross, our oldest, and our son. But Steph had this absolute obsession about she could see the girl, she knew she was there, and she was going to have her one day.
Yeah.
So in the end, she said, I want to have another baby. And I said, okay. But it's going to be tough. And she said, it's tough anyway. No more novels if you're not going to, you're going to worry about this. I said, no, let's have her. So the best thing, of course, that ever happened to both of us.
Yeah.
And but I can't make a woman a man or a man a woman. And I think there are plenty of examples throughout the history of literature and storytelling where men have written very effectively about women, and we don't even have to really think about the men who women have written about successfully, who, look at the 19th century, for goodness sake, a handful of men just drop into your lap and their names. We've all seen the TV, even if we haven't read the books, but, starting with Heathcliff, invented by an innocent young girl. Where'd you get that from?
Yeah.
So, writing about the opposite sex, it's not a matter of why I chose to make them a woman. I didn't. I followed the story, and the impetus of the story was something that I used to call it an offer of the imagination, from the sort of subconscious level, where you are writing about something that you think you've understood, but in fact it's a cover story for something else that you need to get out. I mean, I write compulsively. I write for my life. It's like swimming. Keep swimming and you won't drown. Keep writing and, you'll continue to enjoy this business, whatever it is. Something like that. So, I mean, Steph, I remember when I was writing, I think it might have been Love Song, and something awful was going to happen. Oh, no, it was Cold Creek. And I said to her one day, we're having lunch, and I said, oh, something awful is going to happen in this book. I know, I can just feel it. It's developing. And she said, you're not allowed to kill the girl. And I said, darling, I wouldn't kill her. If that's the story, that's the story. What am I going to do? That's going to be the thing, in a sense, that completes this story or brings it. I mean, the ending, in a sense, looks back right to the beginning always. I feel a sense of the ending is when something has been brought into focus that began as something else. And then the ending kind of reveals it to have been, okay, right. Something like that. There's a sort of, if there isn't that there, you haven't quite got it, I think.
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, but I certainly don't plot because it would get in the way of what I'm doing. I tried that when I first started writing. I did write a plot and a storyline for the Timmington Knot, but I couldn't stick to it.
That was your first manuscript, but that came out as your second book, is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So, going back to A Brief Affair, a bunch of us from the book club, we were talking about this earlier, the fact that it was an affair that was the catalyst for Fran's self-actualization and recognizing her inner life.
To me, it's a book. To me, it's a book about man or woman, whoever, us.
Yes.
We, whatever. Finding and in this case, it's Fran, finding that space of our creative selves.
Yes.
And her life is filled to the brim with family and job.
Yeah.
And where is the dream when she was an 18-year-old or 16-year-old or whatever? There was a dream. a kind of visceral sense who she might be and of what might happen and all that. Very sensitive to all that stuff. Where's it? Has it still there? When she meets the Chinese guy, it's still there. That sort of little gut punch that is, you didn't plan it. You didn't go and look for it. It gets you. Bing. Oh, someone rang the bell. You can't deny it. You can maybe not act on it, of course. You have a choice there. But the little bell ringing is true to you. And it happens to everybody. I mean, we all deal with it differently.
Yeah. And I think it had to be an affair because it had to be just that level of intimate and just that level of physical to have had that impact on her to push her forward. Do you think it could have been anything other than an affair? Like
anything could be anything, but it wasn't.
Yes, it wasn't.
And anyway, the title of the book, I just did the Adelaide Festival, an event down there, and whoever made the title of the thing that I did, whoever made that title, it wasn't me, but it was titled Life is a Brief Affair.
Yeah.
And that comes from Valerie.
From Valerie, yeah. That was such a good moment, actually, in the book when Valerie says that to Fran. Life is a brief affair, and my heart just went, oh!
Well, she's 86, and when you're in the death zone, you look back, and because there isn't any looking forward, is there? That's the edge of the cliff. So you're looking back, inevitably. You don't have a future at that age. You have a past, and hopefully it's a rich past. And you have a present if you're very lucky. And I'm very lucky in that I have a present and I'm healthy and I have wonderful grandchildren and all the rest of it. Friends, wonderful friends. So, yeah, I feel blessed. And I don't know why I should be. And I don't think there's any reason. It's just luck. But, yeah, and you look back and I think, oh, my God, that's it.
Yeah.
And a lovely friend of mine who is dead now, he's gone, Jacob Rosenberg, and I was launching a book for him, and we talked a bit about the book, East of Time, and I said something about his family were all killed in the Holocaust, and he was the only survivor of them all, and I said to him something like, has time ameliorated it in any way? Yeah. And he said, one lifetime is not enough, Alex, to forget anything. And now I know. He was my age. He was 86 when he died, and I'm now 86. So, and it's true. I mean, one lifetime is not long enough for us to forget. The beginning comes around to meet the end. And it forms this little circle, I suppose. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't have to, does it? It can go off in all directions, like a firework in the end.
I found the concept of the newborn child that she kind of manifested and imagined. I found that really fascinating.
I found it vaguely disturbing, and I wasn't quite sure why it was there, But I suppose it was a sort of voice or vision or image. I mean, I'm an image person, I suppose, rather than a word person. That sounds silly to say it, but it's true. And maybe it came as a kind of warning to her.
Yeah.
To what? I don't know. Wanting to wake up to yourself, or find yourself, you're losing it, you're 44 or 42 or whatever she was, you're in the middle, you're right in the middle, it's a good age, a great age, it doesn't get better. Your foot may start aching anytime, nothing's happened, nothing bad's happened. So it's all beautiful. You've got your energy, full peak, all that stuff. And maybe it was just her because of
intuition.
I beg your pardon? Intuition. Yeah, that kind of underlying thing that we have. Oh my God, that was horrible. I'm not even going to think about that. that baby sitting there staring at me.
Exactly. Because I thought that, Alex, when I was reading it, I thought this is like her subconscious just knowing her more than her conscious self really does. And it's just sitting there staring at her like, I am here. I manifest all of this. How are you not seeing me? Or I don't know. I was quite moved by that little baby. How did anybody else feel about the child? Was it unnerving, or did
Must have been a male thing there, I think.
in what sense?
The impregnation of having a child.
Okay.
No sexual exchange.
Okay, right.
I didn't really hear that.
So Venetia was just saying that it was quite symbolic, like the male impregnation, like the consequence of the affair, like kind of like a a guilty manifestation or something.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean? Yeah.
Maybe not guilty, but just that is the result usually of a union.
Yes, yeah. So, does anyone else have any questions? No? Okay. So, I am so pleased. We do just need the microphone so that Alex can hear you.
I think his view is intersectional feminism fabulously.
So one of our members just said that your perspective, sorry, repeat that?
Behind the wonderful bell hooks is intersectional feminism magnificently.
Did you hear that, Alex?
I think I did. What's bell hooks?
Bell Hooks is like an eminent intersectional feminist. She's passed away now, 2 years ago.
Right.
But she's an academic.
Right.
Lovely. Okay, so
and you sound as though you're really interested in that sort of thing. And I wonder who, if anybody, has read Rosika Parker's book, Mother Love, Mother Hate, The Power of Maternal Ambivalence. It's a grand book that I read that when I was writing Love Song. Yeah, I mean, no, sorry, when I was writing Conditions of Faith, and she was going to reject the baby. When she got to rejecting the baby, and it followed from another book that I read, which was The Myth of Motherhood by Elizabeth Badinter, French writer. And both of them, I mean, Rosika Parker was a psychiatrist, she may still be, and her book is really case studies, in which she doesn't name people, but it's about mothers who hated their babies and feared that they would do something awful, like chuck one out the window or something. Yeah, okay, so normality, not allowed to be spoken about, however, because it has to be pink and fluffy and always lovely, like the wedding, wasn't it? Before he beat her up and eventually killed her. Oh, hang on. That's life? It seems to be, doesn't it? But, so there was a whole area, and it may still affect a lot of people like that, a whole area that was taboo, really. Even today, actually, because sometimes I bring this up in a conversation with people, and if you say something like, well, we all hate and love, it's a matter of love-hate with our children. The imposition of a child is so powerful. It's both a gift. There's no other gift that is as powerful as that. It hasn't been in my life anyway, but it was very disturbing for Steph. I mean, and Christ, it's such an enormous event. We take it for granted because we're always doing it, giving birth to babies, each other, making new ones. But boy, when you think about it, it's heroic, the whole thing. This bloody great lump finally comes out. And I was lucky. I didn't mind that Ross, our son, had the gripes and cried or screamed and carried on. Didn't worry me. I just walk him up and down all night singing to him. Maybe that's what my dad did with us. I don't know. He's the kind of bloke who might have done that. But Steph went through that period, of course, of trying to deal with the enormous floods and tides incidents of the emotion through which, having become the mother, you're a different person. and the sort of thought that she had very strongly in her head, impression that she had sometimes when she looked at the child, was, I've lost my own life.
Which is in the book.
Is it? Oh.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. No, but it's I'm glad that you talked about that, Alex, because that was a very profound part of the book where Fran is reflecting on, because she feels like you notice in the book she's really feeling quite disconnected from her children. And she's at odds with that, whether she rushes to then know more or whether she actually focuses on herself. And she reflects about that when you become a mother, she talks about when Marguerite was born, that she actually gave over ownership of her own life to, and she ceased being the owner of her life once Marguerite was born. And she just had to make space for this tiny little landlord that came in and kind of navigated her life.
Yeah, landlord.
So, yeah.
I mean, okay, so it isn't the same for men. And that's one of the huge distinctions, isn't it, between men and women, is the birth of the child after the, and labour is a great word for it, but after the labour of the 9 months, in a sense, and the sense of promise. And everybody says, oh, you'll love it. It's wonderful. It'll be wonderful. Where you wait, bloody painful for a start. And then somehow you've lost something as well as having gained it. For me, it was pure gain. Getting Ross was pure gain. I didn't lose anything. In a sense, it made me real.
My mother felt the same about me.
Yeah, your mum, you made her real.
Yes, all our mothers did. My mum's here tonight, and
Is she? Hi,
Tiffany
Mum.
Cap to you, Mum. Yeah. I just want to say that I am so pleased with how you handled Joseph in the story. He just ended up being my favourite character, and my heart absolutely broke for him, and I actually panicked. I really panicked and rushed through the pages when Eleni passed, and then he's just been kind of shunted off by the university, and they've basically bulldozed his little world, and he's now just in this flux. He's in this in-between zone and looking like he's just going to spend the rest of his days in this little hellhole. And I panicked and flicked. How did other people feel at that stage? That was really hard to read. And I just was so relieved when it all came. You handled him beautifully, and it just made so much sense when he was connected with Tommy.
Yeah, that was a total surprise. I loved that too. I mean, I just loved writing it, But they were just mates. They never talked about it, but they were friends.
And
Imagine how Tommy must feel when Joseph dies.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not in the book, but it's sort of flagged down the track.
But so many of these characters, like that we're focusing on the inner life and the self-actualization of Francis Egan, but so many of the characters are actually having these self-actualizing, I can't even say the word, I'm sorry, Alex, these profound moments, like we see through the book, Tommy just come into himself and find, he spends all this time cloistered up in his bedroom and writing, and not totally knowing how to connect with his parents. And then finally, as soon as Joseph and the dog Jenny come to the farm, he's out there. He forgets about writing. He's out there and he's connected to the land, and he wants to grow things. And he always had that connection to, was it Ina up on the hill?
Ina was a real person in my life. She was a neighbour when I had the farm at Araluen. Wow. Yeah. And her name was Ina. And she's gone now.
Was it Ina Turner? Was that her name?
No. Ina. No, Ina. Her husband was also Tom. I've lost the surname for the moment.
No, that's all right. Yeah. But she was a wonderful character too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I loved that she connected with Tommy, and that she didn't need to, like you do mention in the book, that actually Fran goes up and meets with Ina, and they have pleasantries, but they're not connecting. It's not about them. It's not about the adults of the world. It was about Tommy connecting with Ina, and because they were so connected to that place, and she was kind of passing on something, and Tommy's deciding that he's going to live on her farm. And he's going to. Wasn't it so beautiful when he's saying he's going to plant new trees next to the old trees, and he'll never get rid of the old trees. It was really beautiful. Yeah.
Well, it's lovely writing things like that.
Yeah.
And there's so much there, but the thing that you have to be careful of or aware of is the sort of pacing of the story, in the sense of, well, you could write a lot more about that.
Yeah.
And if you did, I'm just going through some stuff that I wrote earlier, a few weeks ago, and going through it now, I see this huge patch, sort of page and a half, suddenly intervenes between something that's going on here, and then we pick it up again later, and I think, oh, you've lost it, mate, and so it's gone. I've just chucked it away. I deleted it before Steph gets to it and deletes it, because she's very good at that. I used to call her the shredder.
The shredder.
Not really. She's wonderful.
That's an interesting thing, because there is that notion, that concept that in the editing process, authors oftentimes have to kill their darlings, and I really well, you see what I'm like with writing questions. I can't narrow that down,
You can.
So, well, I can, but I need to get better at that. So I'm really intrigued by this concept that authors, when they're editing, there might be something that they love. There's a bit of prose or something, and it's moved them, but it doesn't serve the narrative, so it has to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Was there anything like that in A Brief Affair? Were there sections?
I can't remember, but I do remember with the Ancestor game many years ago, which is a book that came out in '92. And my editor at the time, Bryony Cosgrove, when she first read the manuscript, they wanted it. And of course, once you have an editor, it's because they love the book and they want the best for you. So, and I've never had a bad editor, thank God. But she said, this chap, the narrator, we've got to get rid of as much of him as we can. And I said, that's me. She said, yes, I know, it's really boring. So I inadvertently, in a sense, written this boring stuff about myself, really in a very surface sort of way.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to her, we were having a meeting in my study at the time, and I remember going over to the manuscript, grabbing it, and taking pages out and moving it around. She said, oh, don't do that, don't do that. I said, yeah, I can see what I've got to do to get rid of him.
Yeah, okay.
But I knew she was right. Editors have always been helpful to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Steph's the best editor I've ever had.
Yeah.
That's something that she points out to me has developed over the years, and her familiarity. And if you want answers to all those questions, by the way, Steph is putting together, and Annette Barlow will publish it. She said she will, and she loves it. A collection of my letters, but not as letters. It's going to be behind the novels.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
So it's going to be what was going on, writing to friends, loved ones, publishers, other people about the books that I'm working on. And it's a story in itself of how they come into being. And so it's kind of like off stage or behind the novel. It's sort of before the novel happens as a final product. There's all this other shit goes on,
All the nitty gritty, all the really exciting stuff, I think.
A lot of it, and a lot of it is kind of anxiety making, and you never really know it. It's always an act of, I mean, it's as well as being an act of the imagination, it's always an act of faith to set out to look for these stories. And if you're not somebody who can plot them, I mean, if you write a genre book, you've really got to obey the laws of that genre. There's got to be hints dropped along the way, evidence that can be referred to later, things like that. And there's got to be an ending, or there's got to be a body somewhere. Quite often the body's on page 3 and it's a young girl, but it's sometimes it's right there on page 1. Oh, how different. But anyway, so there's got to be a body, at least one, sometimes 20. Who cares? Several fitted together, the front of one and the back of the other one. Oh my God. Anyway, it's very mechanical, I'm afraid. All that.
Just one of the members has just asked, how far away is that book that Steph's working on?
Oh, that'll. I'd say that she's also going through my notebooks, and where a notebook, and notebooks are sort of usually about. Some of them are already in archives, so she won't have access to them. She would have access, but she can't. Not going to bother doing that. Not going to make an ogre out of the book. I would say probably Christmas.
Oh, that's exciting.
I'm not sure.
That's
I mean,
excellent.
we haven't decided those, or the publisher really hasn't decided that yet. Annette Barlow will let us know what. I mean, they don't force me to do anything at all, and we've been working together for years, over 20 years, and she's wonderful. But with Steph and Annette working on these things, I really trust what's happening.
Yeah.
It's not really in my hands. Steph also did a collection called The Simplest Words, which Annette published. I'm not sure what their plans are at this stage, but I know that she wants it and she's happy to pay for it and all that.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. But it's not just a collection of letters, it's the kind of story, if you like, leaving out all the letters that don't refer or relate to that kind of aspect of life.
Yeah.
I think.
Alex, how do you feel about doing a short reading for us?
Yeah, okay. You said that.
Woohoo!
And I thought I'll just open the book, and if it looks okay, I'll read from it.
Yes.
So will I?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
So will I start now?
Yes, please.
Okay. So why Tunisia? Tom asked her after quite a long silence between them. Coming after that silence, his question sounded a bit abrupt to Fran, and she thought she detected an undertone of irritation in it, as if he'd been sitting there mulling it over in his head for some time, complicating its meaning for himself in that slightly paranoid way he'd got into, before finally blurting it out. So why Tunisia? She thought, yeah, why Tunisia? But why the irritation? They were sitting side by side on the couch, facing the wood heater. They'd been drinking the heavy red wine they both liked. It was late now. Was their special time of the evening to be together, without the children and without their work. Just the two of them, as they used to be, as they had been, for that brief time before they were married and had children. The time when they were both still passionately interested to know what the other one was thinking and feeling. When they had picnicked on the grass in the botanical gardens on summer days, and he had rested his head in her lap and looked up into her eyes, desiring and puzzling and adoring. A time when they were telling each other their dreams. His hope of establishing himself as a fine cabinet maker of the old school, and her dream of becoming a professor. A time now long before the labyrinth of complicated moods and uncertainties and the more difficult familiarity of routine had woven their web. Watching her reading Valerie's diary earlier, he had said he would be interested to hear her read something from it, which wasn't quite what he'd meant. What he'd really meant, but didn't want to say in so many words, because saying it would be bound to make it real, was, why are you keeping her diary so bloody secret? We used to share everything. We aren't sharing things anymore in that way, the way we used to. That's one real change, since China. It was true. She didn't want to share Valerie's diary with him. But whether the need to keep things to herself had begun since China or was already there when she arrived in China, she couldn't say. She wondered if it was the need to have something of her own that had made her slide so effortlessly into her brief affair with the beautiful man on the bus. Would she have fallen in love that night in Hefei if she'd not already been feeling this need for something of her own? Fran took another drink of wine. Then she set the glass down on the low table in front of the couch, and she picked up Valerie's diary, which she had put down by this time on the couch beside her. And she opened the diary and read to him from the section that would answer his question. He listened without interrupting her, resting back against the cushions and gazing straight ahead at the dull red glow from the dying fire behind the window of the Ned Kelly. He needed to be reassured that there was nothing difficult or disturbing lurking between them. Since she'd got home from China, he'd had the feeling things had changed between them, almost as if there was a stranger in the house with them whose presence neither of them was allowed to mention. She could feel his nagging need to be reassured by her. So before beginning to read to him, she placed her hand on his thigh and leaned across and kissed him on the mouth. He smiled and put his arms around her, and he whispered, "God, I love you." "I love you too," she said. And it was true. She did love him. But she was more aware these days that there were many different ways of loving. She read the entry slowly, and Tom gazed into the fire and listened to her. The entry she read was from a time before Valerie arrived at Kalula, during the years when she was in England, living with her father's sister, Philippa Summers. Sidi Bou Said, Tunisia, July 1947. Okay? Is that enough?
Beautiful.
Okay. I don't hear the applause.
Could you hear the applause? It was beautiful.
I didn't hear applause.
Oh, did you not? Ah!
I don't know why, but I can't hear what happens among the audience. I mean, I'm talking to you, and I trust you when you say there's an audience down there.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are. There is. Yeah.
Ah, so at the beginning of the session, we were applauding a lot.
Were
so you wouldn't have been, so it would have just looked like I was sitting there like a wally, but actually.
Well, I thought that.
Yes, yeah, we were, we were clapping a lot. Well,
I didn't hear all that. But and then after a while, you got a bit bored and pissed off, and you didn't clap anymore. Is it right? Gradually, it went away. But instead of calling you Billy, I could call you Wally.
Yeah. You can call me anything you want, Alex.
Be careful what you say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love hearing you read your work. I listened to when you did a reading at the National Library, and you started from the very beginning of the book in that.
Yeah, I couldn't think that night. I just flicked the book.
I love hearing you read your work. I think it's such a special thing to hear people read their own work, and it just takes it to the next level.
Does it?
Oh. Yeah, I think it really does.
Relates a bit to what Dad said.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's the voice.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
What's the voice that you read in? Of course, when we read, and if we're reading about, this is one of the mistakes I think they make, sorry to say so, but on the ABC and in these books that they read for you, readers tend to sort of perform the book, perform the words. And if it's heavy, they say heavy,
Yeah.
Forget it. That's reading the thing for the audience, so the audience can't really. It's explaining the meaning of the
Yeah.
word, and it kills it for me. I can't bear to listen to it. But
So
good
that
good
comes.
readers like Peter Ustinov or someone like that. I know how rare and beautiful that is. When he reads, it comes to life.
Yeah.
He doesn't read it for you.
Yeah. That relates to what you were saying before about as being a writer leaving space for the reader.
Yeah.
So even when you're reading work, leave space for people to interpret the reading.
Is it something like silence in music, pauses? I mean, the silence in music is half the value, isn't it? Often,
Yeah.
unless of course it's bluegrass, and then you don't really want a lot of silence. Oh, look, yeah, the odd silence, bluegrass, and then the beat goes on in your head, and then bang, they come back in again.
Yeah.
You like bluegrass?
Love it.
Great, good on you. Yeah, me too. I always feel envious of those people playing those bloody instruments. That's the only thing. I did try to learn the guitar once, and I did learn something. I learned to respect guitar players. Yeah.
Now, does anyone have any final questions for Alex? Yes. Lucky, could we get the microphone? Yes, just the lady there. Yeah.
I would just like to ask why Valerie and our lovely gardener didn't ever get to meet.
Didn't ever get to what?
Meet.
In their later life?
Joseph was there. Frances was the conduit, but she didn't ever put Valerie and Joseph together. Why?
Yeah, that's right. No, I don't know. You'd have to ask her. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to, and I hoped that I would. No, I'm serious. I really did. And Steph said, "Oh, it'd be terrific when Joseph and Valerie meet." And I said, "Yeah, won't it be interesting? I wonder what will transpire from all that." And of course, it didn't happen. And I'm not sure why. It just didn't. And then I would have had to force it in as something
Yeah.
I'd planned to do. Or, as you say, kill your darlings. I mean, it was one of those things. I mean, these sort of things are not gratuitous. There is a kind of dynamic about them that you'd better acknowledge it, because it's going to change things radically if you don't, and you're going to lose something. I know with Conditions of Faith, the draft that the American publishers bought from me was, I was sitting on the phone talking to Sarah McGrath, who was my editor, and she used to ring me from New York, and we'd sit there and talk. That was the editing process. And she said, "Wouldn't it be terrific if Emily and I can't remember the name of the woman, but this American archaeologist woman, wouldn't it be terrific if they met?" And I said, whoa, absolutely. I'm going to rewrite the book because I've missed that. And suddenly I really want it. She said, no, please don't change it. We love it the way it is. And I said, no, I really want to write that. If I didn't really want to write it, I can see it. And one of the great thing about it was that Emily had only had men companions before that. Even though one of them was a gay bloke, it doesn't mean that there's the same liberty. She was pregnant, and they're in Sidi Bou Said in Tunisia, where Steph and I went. That's where the research happened. And the American woman and Valerie are sitting at lunch together at Antoine's house. And the American woman says, "Come on, I'll show you Antoine's house." Sure, you haven't seen it all. It's a beautiful old Zarouk, where it used to belong to the Bay, the local Muslim Bay. And when they stand up, she puts her arm around Emily and pats her tummy and says, "I worked right up to the last week." Come on. That's a different relationship, totally different relationship to the relationship, even with a lovely trusted friend like Antoine.
Yeah.
Different. And immediately there's another dimension of both of those characters appears. And that's women to women. And a lot of men talk as if that's some kind of Kabbalistic secret. It's not. It's fucking human interaction on the level of, come on, you guys, when you get together, you change. You're not the same as you are when your wives are around. You're different, subtly different. Not so subtle sometimes, but that and I didn't plan that. I kind of saw it when they stood up, and I actually, she's got this big belly, and of course this woman has had children. They just put her arm around her waist and patted her belly and said, I didn't introduce anything about having children or the whole subject. She just said straight out, I worked right up to the last week. I'm one of those people, I'm a toughie.
Yeah.
And off they went into a relationship which inspired Emily to find herself. Again, it's probably the same story.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there, Alex.
It's actually 10:26, so I've been working overtime.
Yes, you have.
Double time, mate.
This has been fabulous. Thank you so much. This has been really insightful. It's been wonderful to talk to you about your work, and this was a wonderful book. We all thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And I can't wait for more work to come. And actually, I can't wait to read your back catalogue. A whole heap of us have bought a lot of your back catalogue to dive into it.
I would suggest Conditions of Faith.
Yeah.
And Love Song.
Love Song. Conditions of Faith and Love Song.
There are plenty of others, but I would suggest those immediately.
Yes. All right.
Thanks.
Immediately. Conditions
of
Faith
but
and Love
immediately.
Song.
I mean, first cab off the rank, if you like, and give him a copy of Coal Creek. You never know, he might like it.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Billy. You've been wonderful.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
And you won't be able to hear the clapping, but there's lots of clapping happening now.
See that you haven't got microphones out there among the audience. Audience microphones are needed as permanent fixtures.
Sorry, what was that?
Well, audience microphones would have relayed the reactions of the audience.
Yes, we're a little bit of a grassroots thing here. Yeah. We're learning with the tech and we're expanding.
Yeah, I mean, you made that lovely little film, did all those sorts, and you've clearly done a lot of background reading on him. Thank you.
There's a room full of fans here. We've got a full house tonight.
Hi, fans.
We're very grateful for your time.
Thank you
so much, Alex.
Lovely. Will I switch you?
Say hi to Steph for us.
I will do. Yeah. Okay. One day we'll get to Albany and John
would be
Deuce.
Wonderful. That would be wonderful.
We're not going to drive all the way though.
That got a very big reaction.
Okay. Lovely.
Thank you.
I'll switch you off. You can stay there.
Thank you, Alex.
But you'll disappear.
Bye.
Goodbye and thank you.
Bye.